right. Well, first, thank you guys very much for having me. Mr. Johnson, Cien, our hosts here. Everybody's acting like I'm doing them some huge favor, filling in a spot and talking. I was just planning on showing up and being with you guys. So getting the opportunity to speak is a tremendous opportunity, and it's an honor to do for you guys. I don't know about the billing, filling in for Mike Enoch. I didn't sign on for that, so bear with me. And I've known about this since Thursday, so a lot of it's off the cuff, and I'm going to rely on some audience participation. I think my Q&A is probably going to be a little bit longer. So Mr. Johnson just asked me, like, all right, what's the theme of your talk? And I hadn't even considered a title of what the talk should be. So I'm like, Introduction to Asatru. I think that I'd rephrase that, and I'd call it Asatru, a white man's religion. There's a couple of questions as far as suggestions. How many of you are familiar with the basic idea of what Asatru is? All right. Well, for those of you who aren't, it's an Icelandic word that basically means true to the gods, and it's a worship of the pre-Christian gods of Europe. And that may sound odd to folks, and it may conjure up images in your head of folks dressed like Vikings and acting silly and, LARPing. And that's not at all what we do. The Asatru Folk Assembly, as we practice Asatru, it's not a reenactment of something our ancestors did in the past. It's an enactment of a living faith within our lives and within our communities. It's very much modern, and it's very much catered towards the needs of our people, just as in our ancestors' time, it was catered to the needs of their people. The Vikings didn't go out and get their loincloths and atlatls to be more spiritual, and us today don't need to, LARP something that was done 1,000 years ago. But the divinity that spoke to our people in those times speaks to us today. Whether we realize it or not, it's within all of us in what we like to refer to as our folk soul. There's a tie that binds everyone in this room, and we come from a common heritage, a common background, and common ancestors. That bonds us together, and it speaks to something very serious within our soul. And that's kind of the basis of what Asatru is about. I was given a couple, prompts of things that you folks would like to hear today, and, one of them is basically how I came to practice Asatru. I was always a very spiritual person growing up. I was spiritual, but my family wasn't religious, and so I didn't really know what to do with it. But I knew it was there. I knew, when I needed help on a test or something, I'd pray to God, and somebody would hear me, and I felt better, and I was a spiritual person that way. But I didn't really have a name for it and know what to do with it. So, growing up as a young man, that wasn't enough. I needed something. So, as a white man in America, I thought, what do we have? And boom, well, you're not an Indian, so you're not a Hindu. I'm not a Jew. I'm not, an Arab, so I can't be a Muslim. So what do you got? You got Christianity. Okay, let's do this, and let's do it right. My aunt was a Jehovah's Witness. So I'm like, all right, let's do this. They like their Bibles. They know their Bible's good, so if I'm going to do it, I'll give it to them. They study really hard, and they know their Bibles. Cool. Let's do it. Let's do it authentic. Let's strip out everything European about Christianity and take it back to Paul's church. All right, I'll do that. So I started reading my Bible all the way through. Some things sounded a little bit off. And I'm like, you know what? If it's my opinion or God's opinion, I'm probably the one who's wrong, so okay. I tried to do this about 2 or 3 times, and I came to the conclusion that divinity as described in that book, everything that my heart was set upon, everything that I felt was right in this world and honorable to do was contrary to what I read that book told me was, the appropriate thing to do. Everything I wanted to do that I felt was noble was sinful. So I got to this kind of a scary precipice. I didn't know what else was out there, but I'm like, if this Middle Eastern tome is all that there is, and this is God, and on the other side is damnation, I'm going to have to choose the latter because I can't be a hypocrite and support something that, in my view, is evil and dishonorable. And it was scary because right then I had nothing. And it's like my feet were out from under me. But I'm like, well, what should we do? I was very aware of history at the time. And I was also very aware that I was a white man. I wasn't as aware of things as I am today, but I was about 21-year-old. I was, well, what should I do? Well, what did our ancestors do before we had Christianity? Before this outside Middle Eastern religion came to the shores of Europe, what did we have? So I started researching and I started looking for things. I'm like, what do I do? And I thought I was the only guy, like by myself, in my backyard doing some ritual to Odin and Thor, and I felt like a weirdo. I'm like, nobody else does this. But I started looking and Googling things, and I came to this weird group of folks called the Asatru Folk Assembly. And I saw these videos by this guy, Steve McNallen, and they made a lot of sense. And I started looking, and hey, there's other people that do this. This is a thing. Like, other people actually do this in this day and age. At the time, it was 2001. Like, this actually happens. Okay, and from then I was kind of hooked. And I found one of the slogans of the AFA back then and to this day is Asatru. It's about roots, it's about connections, it's about coming home. That's one of the biggest things we hear from our membership is like, wow, I really felt like I came home. They'll come to one of our events and like, I just felt at home. It just felt right in my soul. And that's what I meant earlier when I spoke about folk soul. There's something about the practice of Asatru that resonates within us because it comes from us and it flows through us throughout time. So another question that was posed to me is, what specifically is the Asatru Folk Assembly and how is it different than other faiths? It's what we call a folk religion, and in this context, it's some evil racist contraption. But every place else in the world, it's a celebration of your cultural heritage, and it's praised. Pretty much I say any, and there's bound to be an exception, but I think those exceptions prove the rule. Any faith that isn't an Abrahamic faith tends to be specific to a people, to a group of people. We had to come up with this Icelandic name meaning true to the gods because in this day and age it's a question. But if you asked our ancestors, what religion are you, they'd name what tribe they're from. They're like, I'm Norwegian, what do you mean? Or I'm German, what are you talking about? Because the question itself would be baffling. Your faith was connected to your tribe, to your ancestors, all the way back to the beginning, to that font of Aryan consciousness, be it Hyperborea or Aryavarta, came down to our people through a line of folks. And this is how we connect to that divine, or traditionally how our folks connected to the divine. That was done through, a number of different ways, but there's a powerful spirituality that the Asatru Folk Assembly embraces that connects Aryan peoples back to our very beginnings. And I use that word Aryan, and I don't use it to be provocative. I use it because the word means noble and implies a shining nobility. Like everyone in this room, we came out dressed nice. Dressing nice and looking sharp is a revolt against the modern world. We chose to hold our head up and carry ourselves with nobility. And that's why I refuse to give up the semantic ground on that word. But there's a group of peoples, which we all came from, that go back to this very ancient spirituality, and you see it expressed many different ways. Asatru, we use a lot of the terms and a lot of the imagery that we get in Romantic Germanic period and in Icelandic sagas and things that you may be familiar with Viking things. It's not the be-all, end-all. That just happens to be the tail end where we had a lot of writing done and a lot of recording done. But the spirituality is much older than that. With the AFA, I was able to go on this trip to Denmark and meet some of our membership over there, and they showed us all these sacred sites and these spiritually sacred places to Asatru, and none of them were Viking things. They were all stuff from the quote-unquote Celtic period. They were Neolithic stone structures where our ancestors worshiped the gods from the Stone Age, and I was tremendously honored. I got to stand in those same circles and worship the gods 5-6 years ago, so that was tremendously important to me. The question arises, why is this, in my mind, the optimal faith for our folk? Because it springs from us. I've talked a little bit about this so far, but that folk soul that connects us, people have we're trained by the Abrahamic faiths to take religion extremely literally and to read things from a book and like, oh, you believe Thor's some buff dude with a chariot with goats riding around in the sky? No, I'm not silly. but that picture creates an image in my mind and my soul that helps me understand what Thor is, what that force of Aryan divinity is. So that's the thing. The myth cycle are powerful truths. They're not literal truths. They are pathways to truth. They show us truth in ways that our mind and our soul is uniquely capable of understanding the divine. And you find that because that's developed through 1,000 years of the experience of our people. That's why I think it is uniquely suited to each of us as people of Northern European descent, as people who trace their roots back to that font of Aryan consciousness to embrace that spirituality. And you see that expressed throughout Europe and in, little corners of the rest of the world that have since been diluted by white genocide. But it's a birthright, and it's something that, I guess the bigger thing I was going before I was interrupted was, with the imagery of Thor, people ask about the gods, and some people have trouble to coming to divinity and believe and wholly embracing it at first. Like, do you really believe in these gods? Do they really exist? And then they ask questions. Well, do the gods exist external, or are the gods an archetype, or are the gods this, that, or the other? And what's unique and hard for us to wrap our minds around, being trained in Abrahamism, gods are all of those things. They are from without and help shape us and shape our existence. They also speak to us from within, from that folk soul that I spoke about. They give you wisdom and insight from the way back through your ancestors. A common belief that we believe in Asatru is similar to what our folks believed before Christianity, and even after. They would trace royal lines back to being the descendants of Odin or the descendants of Frey, depending on where you were at. That descent from the gods is something that was held common by our ancestors and something we believe very strongly today. They're not just an external deity that we get to pick and choose from a smorgasbord. Oh, I like that one. They're our ancestors speaking through us, and we revere them as such. Another thing that's very important, I feel, about Asatru is it's a community religion. A lot of people get it twisted and think that it's this Viking, I'm an ideal, I'm a rugged individual all the time. Individual development is extremely important, but our ancestors viewed their entire worth as how they fit into a community. We've taken words like honor and we've molded it into this idea of a personal code, but honor always meant to our ancestors, it was something bestowed upon you by your community. You're receiving an honor. I am honored to be here. They gave me an honor by letting me speak. The honor was something that was a value the group placed upon you. With Abrahamism, we also have become very uncomfortable with gray areas. Just as it's a communal faith, it's very much an individual faith. It's very much a cult of the hero. And if we are each trying to become the hero, that's why I think it's extremely important for us today. The easiest thing we can do to affect change, I assume all of us here see the world outside as less than it ought to be. We see things we want to see accomplished. A lot of us see things that we've lost that we want back, and a lot of us see things still outside of our grasp that we want to reach up and conquer and achieve. That's the Faustian nature of our soul, to do more and to be more. The one thing you can do today to affect that change is to make yourself better, to be the hero in your own saga, to strive for your personal best. And that heroic ethic is something that, again, through foreign faiths, I think has been beat out of our folk, but it's fundamental certainly to Asatru, but any of our spirituality that our ancestors recognized. And it was even carried over into Christianity. It's one of the points that I want to, re-emphasize about I was a Jehovah's Witness. The fortunate thing is they extricated all European Christianity out of it. Christianity becomes a lot less fun when it's Paul's church and you sit around and instead of a glorious warrior heaven, your heaven is sitting around and telling Jehovah how great he is, or things of that nature. It really puts a different perspective, because so much of what Europeans have developed as faith and expressed through Christianity is an expression of our folk soul. I fully believe that we would have cathedrals if we had stuck to Asatru. They just have different things on the stained glass. One of the things about the Asatru Folk Assembly in specific, And I really appreciated this when Mr. Johnson opened up the conversation today. The cool thing about the AFA, the best thing about it, is it brings people out to have real experience. It's church. It's church without Christianity, but it's that community and that structure that our people built society around. People come out just about every weekend around the country in many different areas and different places to honor our gods, to celebrate our ancestors, and to get together and share with one another. One of the cores about Asatru to understand is the idea of communion, and not in the wafer Catholic sense, but our worship of the gods is always done through sharing. We've got two big rituals. One's called bloat and one's called sumbel. In bloat, it's a word that means blood, and it comes from the old times where always it would be a blood sacrifice. But the sacrifice wasn't, offering up everything in whole to the gods. It was a communal meal where we all shared a meal together, just like you'd go to Thanksgiving at your grandparents' house and you'd share a meal with them. And that communal eating, that communal sharing is what we do with our gods in a bigger sense. A sumbel is like that, but it's a drinking ritual with the people who are there, where we make toasts to heroic deeds, to our ancestors, to our gods. And again, we share a horn. We pass around and build that community. So the AFA is really structured around community, and we're really thriving that way. We're bringing people out to meet face-to-face and interact and do things. Another thing that previous speaker brought up was longevity with our movement and things that we do. We've seen tremendous increase in just the last couple of years. We've all watched it just explode with people that get it, people that come out to things like this, people that are becoming politically active. And we've also noticed how much we have so many young people involved. In order for it to be sustainable and something worth doing after it becomes not trendy and when, the winds of change occur, is to have something that we base it around. Have something about this that we're all here for in this room that we come together and celebrate on a internalized level that's part of who we are and what we do, that's part of our community. And we can't exist in opposition to all the things we don't like around us. We have to exist about the things we love about us and the things that we cherish about who we are. It's really potent right now because they're under attack, so we're all coming out to defend them and fight for them. But we got to keep that going when they're not under attack. We got to build up. We got to not always think about how we're fighting off our enemies. What do we do if we didn't have enemies? What can we build? What can we do? I believe that Asatru provides something to build that around. It provides a basis for a community to build that around. You may ask yourself, well, why do you need religion to do that? I've got some atheist friends that bring that up. Well, we could just get together as a social club and do stuff too. But you don't. When was the last time you did? Well, but we could, but you don't. When was the last time people got together and went to church on Sunday? They do that every Sunday. What happened in this world that's great that didn't involve religion? And there's Hammond and Hahn and communist purges, I guess. Other than that, most of the great accomplishments, certainly of Western civilization, have been based on faith, based on our folk reaching out and trying to touch the divine. Asatru, I believe, is the most direct, the most honorable, the most fulfilling to our soul way for Aryan man to reach out and connect and touch that divinity. And so I guess that's what Asatru is about and what the AFA is about in specific. And I'd like to ask you guys now, if you guys got questions, is there anything that you want to ask? Yes, sir.